Hi guys,
Hello,
it's Jess,
and Tiffany.
and today we're going to be discussing the Jennifer Pan case, and we're going to just start out by giving a scripted narration of what happened, and then we're going to talk about it and give some commentary.
Yeah, so Jennifer Pan was from an Asian household in Markham, Canada. Her parents, the Pans, were immigrants from Vietnam that came to Canada to provide their children with more opportunities to achieve academic success. She also had a brother named Felix. However, her parents thought of Jennifer as the golden child. And throughout her childhood, she constantly participated in activities that her parents instructed her to do, such as piano, figure skating, and martial arts as extracurricular activities. She was also expected to be a straight A student in high school, in which she managed to put on a facade for her parents. In fact, the truth was that she was failing in terms of her parents' academic standards. She was getting B's in all her classes, which is considered not too bad in other households, but in her Asian household, it was considered not too good. And also in her senior year, she failed one of her classes, so she actually was unable to graduate high school, and she forged many of her transcripts, including her scholarship letter to Ryerson, University of Toronto. And behind this mask she put on in front of her parents, she felt that she was always inadequate and ashamed of who she was because she couldn't live up to the expectations that her parents put on her. She even forged a loan to her university as well as her supposed $3,000 scholarship. And throughout this lie that she put on that she went to university, and she assumed, supposedly went to classes, she actually just went to the library. And around the time graduation came, her parents obviously wanted to attend her ceremony, but she made up a lie saying, oh, there weren't enough tickets to go around for graduation. And that's when her parents started getting suspicious of her actions, how a lot of her life was kept hidden in front of her parents. And eventually they found out that her transcripts were all fake. She never got a scholarship, she didn't graduate high school, all that. And she was forced to stay at home without a phone or computer, or dating her boyfriend, her secret boyfriend, her paramour, Daniel Wong.
Then eventually, in 2010, in the midst of Jennifer's confinement, when 3 masked gunmen came into the Pan family's home, it came as a shock to both them and their normally quiet suburban neighborhood. The gunmen confronted Jennifer's mother in the living room of the Pan family home and then proceeded to shoot her in the forehead. She died instantly. They then took Jennifer's father, Han, out of his bedroom and forced him downstairs. According to Jennifer's account of what happened, she was in her room talking on the phone when she started hearing strange noises. She claimed to hear footsteps outside of her door, which she somehow identified to not be her parents. Jennifer said that she opened her bedroom door only to find the gunmen pointing pistols at her and screaming, "Where is the money?" She said that one of the gunmen tied her hands to her back with a shoelace and dragged her from her room, ransacking the house and asking her for money. She said that she gave the men a total of $36,000. Yet that wasn't enough. Jennifer accounts that the gunmen then tied her hands to a banister and brought her parents to the basement of their house, where they pleaded for Jennifer's life. She said that momentarily, the sound of 5 gunshots pierced through the night and the gunmen ran off. She accounts that she then dialed 911 with her hands tied to the banister and explained the terrible ordeal her family experienced. To the world, Jennifer was a near-perfect daughter who fell victim to a horrific home invasion that killed her mother and left her father in a coma. But Jennifer's story raised more than a few eyebrows. Is it possible that this seemingly angelic young woman was really a devil in disguise? When authorities reached the Pan family home, they say that Jennifer was tied up exactly how she described, with her hands tied behind her back to a banister. Many questioned if her hands were tied like she described, how could she have dialed 911? And of course, there was the rather obvious question, why would the gunman have left someone unharmed to be a witness? Another striking thing about Jennifer's story was that not much was stolen from her family. After the home invasion, her parents' luxury cars still sat in her garage untouched, and there were TVs and devices still scattered around the Pan family home. Suspicious of Jennifer and her story, the police then brought Jennifer to their headquarters to demonstrate how she could have dialed 911 with her hands bound to a banister. She successfully managed to demonstrate this, but the police still weren't convinced. Jennifer was being truthful, so they arranged for an undercover officer to follow her to her mother's funeral, where they observed she didn't shed a single tear. Detectives were perplexed as to how someone could remain so emotionally unscathed in spite of the horrific events Jennifer allegedly experienced. The police listened to her 911 call one more time, and they were able to hear Jennifer's father screaming in the background. This raised the question to detectives: what parent would, notwithstanding your wife had been shot and you've been shot, would not check on their child to know they are okay? He could hear her screaming, but unfortunately, only Pan, who was fighting for his life in a coma, could answer that question. However, miraculously, he did come out of his coma and fully remembered the terrible ordeal his family went through. When he saw that Jennifer came downstairs, he said that he saw Jennifer come downstairs and speak in a friendly manner to one of the gunmen. This brought Jennifer back into the hands of the police for questioning. There, Jennifer brings up a completely new story. She says that what happened was that she hired the gunman to kill her, as she wanted to die after not being able to see her boyfriend, Daniel Wong. Then she says that she had a change of heart and called it off, but the hitman demanded a cancellation fee, which she was unable to pay. She then accounts that the gunman came to kill her parents instead of her as punishment. To the police, this story was not incredibly convincing, and the police continued investigating. They learned about Jennifer's bold history of lying, and that only made matters worse. Desperate, the police brought Jennifer's boyfriend, Daniel Wong, in for questioning. However, Jennifer and Daniel did not get their story straight, because Daniel blatantly admitted that Jennifer wanted her parents dead. Police then discovered Daniel gave Jennifer a burner phone to contact the hitman, and the SIM card in her phone was missing. They were also able to uncover thousands of texts between Jennifer and the hitman. Two messages sent by Jennifer that stood out were, "Think about it, game time November 8th, and VIP access, which was sent moments before the home invasion. When examining security footage, they also saw Jennifer turning her bedroom light on and off to signal to the hitman that the front door was unlocked. With this evidence, police arrested Jennifer, Daniel, and the three hitmen, who were later identified as Leonard Crawford, Eric Carty, and David Mayavalganam. In 2014, they were all convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy to murder. So this is a truly interesting and unique case, so I'm wondering what your thoughts on it are.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to uncover. I think I also watched a video of when she was interrogated by one of the officers, and that officer just kept saying okay. I don't know if you saw it, but he kept saying okay when Jennifer was telling her alibi and all that. And at first it was really annoying to watch because the officer kind of gave no response, and it seemed like it was going nowhere. But it was really interesting to see Jennifer started to break down. She was crying, and eventually she admitted to her crime. She's a pathological liar. She's been lying for so long, so I guess that is what also contributed to being able to solve this murder. But this was a strict Asian household, and I definitely can somewhat relate to the high standards and expectations of getting good grades, participating in a sufficient amount of extracurricular activities. And although this is definitely an extreme case, what happens to Asian American children or Asian Americans in general, a lot of them do go through a heavy toll on their mental health because their parents expect certain GPA, just certain standards, and that's definitely something that should be relevant. And I think now, obviously this was in 2014, this case, now I think Asian Americans, their families and their parents, I think we're all starting to take into account of our mental health a lot more than we did in the past. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, and I think going back to what Tiffany said, this case raises an interesting question. Was Jennifer born a killer, or was she rather made a killer by the pressure her parents put on her and her upbringing? And I don't think there's really a simple answer to this question. I would have to say a little bit of both, because there are a lot of people who go through the same academic pressure and stress but don't have such an extreme reaction and retaliation. But I think she was born maybe a little bit, her personality traits, I guess, definitely played a role in this, but I think what really made her do this was the control that her parents put on her. And I'm not sure if she would have done the same thing if her parents maybe put a little less pressure on her and took into her mental health more into account.
Yeah, I don't think it was entirely Jennifer's fault. I do think her parents put on a huge impact on this murder case. Jennifer definitely had, like, her parents pressuring her, and like her parents' impact on her was definitely an incentive to the murder. But in the end, the murder was because of her. It was she who decided that she wanted to commit the murder and she wanted to get rid of her parents. So I think it was mainly her fault. Overall, a lot of people impacted her decision on carrying out this murder.
Yes, and I just want to go back to her history of pathological lying starting in high school. And I just think that what would have happened if she was honest with her parents from the start? Because I think as she got into this series of pathological lies, it just kept getting worse and worse, and she just had to grow more lies to cover her old lies, and that must have been incredibly stressful for her to have gone through.
I guess in her head, maybe at the time, was it is better to lie than to actually, tell the truth. Like, it's kind of the dilemma between, like, having a lie about, like, a good life, or, like, to tell the truth, but, you're at fault. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think because of her strict household, I think she was probably pressured into thinking, oh, I cannot, have a single mess up. I have to preserve this perfect persona and just a lie throughout the whole thing. And I can definitely understand why she thought that. I think when I was younger, my parents were a lot stricter with me than now. Like, I remember I was also afraid of saying I got a bad test score in front of my parents. So obviously this case is the extreme of the extremes, but there is to some level in which I can understand why she had to lie. But definitely, I think in the long run, it would have been better for her to just tell the truth from the beginning, because maybe when you're younger, you have more of an influence from your parents. Like, your parents can still control you in some way or somehow influence how you want your future to be. And by the time her parents figured out everything, she was already an adult. So technically she had no obligation to listen to her parents. And I think maybe if she was, a teenager and her parents, try to teach her a lesson at that point, maybe she would have listened to it, because she's still young, she was still immature, and she could have taken the lesson more personally, if that makes sense.
Right, absolutely. And I just think in all crime stories, really, it's just such a series of unfortunate events, and it's really terrible. You have to think to yourself, what would have happened if she hadn't met Daniel Wong? What would have happened if she told, like we were talking about, she told her parent from the start that she was getting bad grades? What would have happened if she left her parents, just peacefully ran away? It's these little decisions and these interactions that just pile up and up and up to create such unfortunate events. And I think also it's a true miracle that her father woke up from his coma, because if he hadn't, I think the police would have still believed Jennifer's lies, because she's an incredibly skilled liar. She created this huge, very specific and detailed story to cover her case, and she was, like we said, she was actually able to go into the police and demonstrate how she could have called 911 on a flip phone with her hands tied to her back and tied to a banister. So there was an incredible level of planning that went into this, and I think that's why it's extremely cynical. But I think deep down inside, Jennifer did have some reservations, considering that she hired hitmen to do it rather than doing it herself.
Yeah, I think she had some kind of guilty conscience within her. Like I said before, from the news source that I read, Jennifer did have some sort of shame into who she was, not only because she wasn't able to live up to her parents' standards, but because she was also disappointed in herself as well. So I definitely think hiring the hitman was a form of showing how she's still she's physically unable to kill her parents because she knows that she's somewhat guilty.
Right, and I think this just goes back to the importance of parenting, because parents really shape and mold who their children are. They have a lot of power in their hands, and I think it is important for parents to encourage their children to work hard and to succeed, but it's also important for parents to make sure their children are doing well mentally and they have good mental health. So I think shout out to all the parents out there. It's incredibly hard to be a parent, because I even see it in my own community around my friends and family, that I think the saying is true that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. A lot of people inherit personality traits from their parents. They act like their parents. And also, if your parents don't expose you to different things, you only have the limited view of the world that your parents gave to you. So I think it's just interesting that if you're under 18 years old, you just live life according to the values that your parents teach you and the things that your parents share with you.
Yeah, I agree. Have you had any experience with having a strict household, having to maintain your grades, all that? Or would you say your parents were really, they were kind of nonchalant about what you did when you were a child?
For my entire life, academically, my parents have not pressured me that much, but they are strict in other ways, like I have to go to bed by a certain time and things like that. But I think I have put a lot of pressure on myself. It's just part of who I am. I've always put a lot of pressure on myself, so I'm lucky that I didn't have my parents pressuring me as well, because I've always pressured myself and motivated myself to achieve. But I think sometimes it is nice to have someone pressuring you in a way to just put you in the right path. I've never really experienced that, and sometimes I feel like it is difficult to not have anyone behind your back and kind of guiding you in a way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think having some sort of independence from your parents is a good thing, because you're not gonna live with your parents your entire life, right?
Yeah.
It's a rare case that you do, but in the end, it's gonna be your life. Your future is in your hands. So I definitely do admire that you kind of have your life in the direction that you wanted to, not directly from your parents, and
Right.
that you develop rational values, not because your parents didn't tell you, but they kind of trusted you to guide yourself in the right direction.
Yes.
And I just want to go back to being in strict households, not only in Asian families, but a lot of times I think, especially because in this Jennifer case, her parents were immigrants from Vietnam, so perhaps a lot of households have this mindset, if they're immigrants, sorry, that there's only one way to success, like academic success, like to become a doctor, a lawyer, those specific professions that are guaranteed a stable financial life. So I think that's maybe what caused the stigma around strict Asian households, and that it's important to be financially stable in front of your own personal happiness. Obviously now we have a lot more professions that are known to give a stable income and that are interesting enough for people to actually pursue. So I think that also contributes to a lot of Asian families, or just families in general, being more open to new professions, you know. I think back then STEM professions were not as admired, but now, you know, as we're getting more and more dependent on technology, so now, you know, parents are starting to look on the bright side with more professions, I guess. I think I'm kind of like repeating myself, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, if I become a parent when I grow up, there's obviously some kind of, I want to guide my children, my future children, into a good direction, but from what I've learned from my parents and from this case is I shouldn't force them, you know, into anything. They shouldn't have any kind of expectation in terms of how academically successful they'll be or how much money they'll make in the future, you know. I definitely think it's more important to value their own happiness and what they want to do in the future before, you know, making a lot of money or something like that. But obviously there has to be some kind of rationality on how they'll be able to live, you know.
Right.
So it's kind of like you kind of need to be in the middle of the spectrum, you know?
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of expectations for the child to meet, because otherwise I feel like they would be completely unguided and unmotivated, especially at young ages where they might not have the experience and the maturity to think about their future and realize why it's important for them to put a little pressure on themselves and be self-motivated and self-disciplined. And I actually wanted to circle back to the investigation and interrogation in this case. I know it was a little bit controversial because at the time Jennifer was interrogated, I believe she was quite young. She was, I don't know the exact age, but the investigation technique that her interrogators used was that a technique when they did not know entirely that she was guilty of the crime. They did not know that she hired the hitman. However, they told her, Jennifer, we just found out that you hired these hitmen, to see her reaction. And I know that that's a very controversial investigation technique because there have been times when that was used on minors especially and young children who said, yes, I did it after hearing that, even when they did not. So
oh, I see. So they kind of pressured them into like confirming their crime even though they didn't really do it.
Yeah, I think that's how they pressured her into admitting she did it when she knew that they knew that she did it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think sometimes, you know, especially wait, did they know at the time of her like pathological lying history at the time during the interrogation?
Yeah, I think in the investigation they slowly learned more and more about her through different sources, family members and whatnot, and they did learn about her pathological lying history, and I think that was a big factor in them realizing that whatever comes out of her mouth, there's a very good chance that it's not true, even if it sounds true, because she is extremely skilled at lying and creating webs of lies.
Yeah, I think maybe that's also why they use that certain technique, because if she was able to put on this facade for so many years, if you kind of don't use any other some kind of intimidating technique, it's going to be hard to break the case, you know? So
Definitely.
I don't think it is entirely wrong to use that technique, you know? But obviously there are cases where this technique has been implemented and it has gone in the wrong direction. So, but yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And luckily this time the technique did work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, another thing I guess I wanted to bring up is that in the whole trial, that like these people were all on trial, the three hitmen, Daniel Wong and Jennifer. What was very interesting is that when he was on trial, his lawyers actually made a case that he was completely innocent and he didn't do anything wrong, because he did not actually himself go and kill Jennifer Pan's parents, and he did not hire the hitman to kill Jennifer Pan's parents. He just put the hitman in contact with Jennifer, and he actually ended up being charged with first-degree murder. And I think he definitely has a very interesting role in this case. Daniel Wong by no means was a good person at the time that he met Jennifer. I know that he had a history of crime, alcohol, and drugs.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why we have this term called accomplice. And, being an accomplice, just because you didn't directly commit the murder, that doesn't mean you didn't help commit the murder, if that makes sense. So, being an accomplice is a big role. It's a key role in helping the murder because if you think about it, if Daniel Wong didn't connect the three hitmen to Jennifer, most likely the murder wouldn't have happened as soon as it did, or maybe it wouldn't have happened at all. So a lot of things that indirectly happen, they still heavily influence big events such as murders and all that.
Yeah, and I think also it's important to, if you are like Jennifer and you are having these terrible, dark thoughts, to just take a second and think and definitely ask for help, although it's hard, so that these terrible outcomes don't happen. Because we know that Jennifer did love her parents to some degree because, like we were saying, she didn't actually murder them herself. She hired hitmen to do it because she couldn't bring herself to end their lives. So I think there could have been a very different end to this story if Jennifer had possibly asked for help, if Jennifer had started telling the truth with her parents, or if Jennifer decided to resolve this peacefully, maybe by just leaving her parents.
Do you know if Jennifer was diagnosed with some kind of mental disorder?
I do not think Jennifer was diagnosed with something, but I could be wrong.
That's interesting. I would have thought maybe she had some kind of mental health issue, because I personally do not think someone who was mentally sane would want their parents to die, I still don't think their children would want them dead, So I'm just surprised that she wasn't diagnosed with any mental health disorder and wasn't taken to an asylum. She was just taken to jail, like a regular jail, and I think her punishment was 39 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Yeah, so she was convicted in 2014. So if it was 39 years, she will be out in 2053.
Right.
So we're about right now we're about halfway through her. Wait, no. No, sorry. Cut that out. I miscalculated.
Yeah, but I think Jennifer, although she devolved to definitely have some mental difficulties and have poor mental health, I'm not entirely sure that it was because of a condition that she actually had or just the adverse situation that she was put into, having a lot of academic pressure on her, and then once again making these lies and then having her parents punish her harshly for the lies that she was putting out there. And what's interesting is that out of parricide cases, the cases of children killing their parents, Jennifer is definitely very similar to a lot of the other cases. She's a textbook example. I'm reading right now that in 54% of these cases, the murders occurred because of a long-standing relationship discord or a quarrel, which is true for Jennifer's case. And in 45% of the cases, the offender lied about their involvement in the crime, trying to conceal their guilt, which is also true for Jennifer's case. So,
Yeah,
I think definitely it's up for debate if Jennifer did have a mental health disorder or if Jennifer was just devolved into becoming such a violent individual after what she went through in her early adolescence.
Yeah. And also just to think about the parents, how shocking it must be. Everything just went downhill very quickly. Just the fact that when she was a teen, those 18 years, they thought she was the golden child, the perfect child that they always dreamed to have. And just quickly in the span of her college years, everything just fell apart.
Right, and I believe that her father Han and her brother Felix actually got a restraining order against Jennifer and wanted to cut off all contact with her. And I can't imagine what they must be going through and what they would think and what they would feel, how sad and betrayed they must feel that Jennifer did what she did and that their wife and their mother passed, unfortunately, because of Jennifer's actions. I think that must be incredibly difficult because I firmly believe that although Jennifer's parents might have been slightly misguided in pressuring her so much, they really did want the best for her because they clearly wanted her to succeed. And I've read before, looking into this case, that they were very poor growing up, and I know they didn't want Jennifer to be in the same situation, so they wanted her to succeed, and they wanted her to become a pharmacist, which they believe was the epitome of success. They thought Jennifer would have a very good life if she followed that path.
Yeah, it is really tragic. But unfortunately, cases like these do happen. And that just shows how sometimes we take our lives for granted, you know? We're really fortunate to be able to have, have opportunities to explore what we're really interested in and not have to, be restricted to a certain route just because we can't afford to explore any other kind of professions. So that's definitely something that I've realized after learning about this case. And then it also definitely shows that I really admire my parents even more. They spent they are also immigrants, so they put a lot of work and effort into, building and improving their futures in America. So I'm really fortunate for that.
And I think this case also goes to show that do not judge a book by its cover. Just because on the outside Jennifer was near perfect, I know that she was figure skating at a near Olympic level. She was supposedly achieving straight A's and got into one of the most prestigious universities in all of Canada. Deep down inside, she was actually lying about all of this and spinning her web of lies, creating new lies about her entire life, and was plotting to cynically kill her parents. So I think even if on the outside Jennifer was this near perfect student, inside she was definitely the complete opposite from that. And in your peers, I guess just people around us, they might seem just like Jennifer did on the outside, nearly perfect, but inside they might definitely not be like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think something else to mention is if you happen to lie or something like that and you make a mistake, we suggest that you should just tell the truth, because like I said, this is a very extreme case, but you happen to make a mistake. I think it's absolutely okay to admit to that. In fact, I would probably respect you even more if you admit to it rather than you keep, holding it on for a very long time. So I think an important value to have is, just always try to be truthful, and it should be okay to make mistakes. Obviously not, serious mistakes, but then that's not really considered a mistake. But you get the drift.
Yeah, I think Tiffany was talking about trust, and that is definitely a huge thing when it comes to lying. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar of the story about the boy who cried wolf. He went out into his town and cried wolf. There's a wolf here, and there was no wolf. He did it again, there was no wolf. And then he did it a third time because there was actually a wolf chasing him, and guess what? Nobody came outside to help him. And Jennifer's story is very similar. She had this history of pathological lies, and I think that's one of the main reasons that the police questioned her second story about wanting to commit suicide and hiring them to kill her, because of her history of pathological lies. So I think definitely if you're known to be a liar and people realize that you're lying and you don't first admit to them that you lied and confess what you did and hopefully ask for an apology, then people won't trust you anymore. And I think it would be very difficult to live your life if nobody trusted you to do anything.
Right, I agree.
Jennifer definitely was not a psychopath. She clearly has feelings like guilt and shame and empathy, because she was ashamed of the fact that she continually lied and was not legitimate in what she said she did, and she was afraid to kill her parents herself because she did care for them deep down inside. So I think that shows that partially Jennifer's upbringing and the way her parents parented, I guess, played a huge role in her choosing to do this. But Jennifer definitely was the one who decided to hire the hitman, and she should be fully responsible because she was the one who did commit this action, even though she definitely had a difficult upbringing considering the pressure her parents put on her.
Yeah, by no means are we defending Jennifer for her crimes. She's definitely responsible, and she does deserve the punishment to serve in jail. But I guess we're just trying to, kind of analyze what she did and somehow try to understand it and put it into perspective, There's definitely a lot to take from this case, and I think we said what we needed to say. But yeah, this is actually our first true crime analysis episode. So in the future we might do some more.
Yeah,
I
think we had a great discussion today, and we really broke down and analyzed Jennifer's case and her situation, and I think this is truly a remarkable case. It's one of a kind. I watch a lot of true crime documentaries, and I've never seen anything like it. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we hope to see you